They say motels are places people pass through, a pause between where you've been and where you're going. But what happens when the stop becomes permanent? This isn't just a ghost story. It's a warning. That evil doesn't always knock. Sometimes it checks in with a suitcase, pays in cash, and disappears before the morning sun hits the window. The first tale in our trilogy is called Washington, D.C., 1997. The Langston Arms was a relic of another era, a building that clung to its past like ivy on brick, tucked between two embassies and shadowed by high rises. It was easy to miss unless you were looking for it. The kind of place that whispered instead of advertised. The lobby smelled of old cologne and wood polish. Bellhops wore crimson jackets, and the concierge still used a rotary phone. Guests were typically foreign dignitaries, wealthy eccentrics, or those who paid handsomely for privacy. Lynn, now in her mid-30s, moved like a shadow, efficient, unnoticed. She knew which rooms to clean quickly and which ones required more discretion. Room 709 was always on her mental list of red flags, but she didn't know why yet. When Mr. M arrived, it was raining. Thunder clapped as he stepped from a black town car. He didn't look like other guests. Too thin, too pale, sunglasses hiding half his expression. He handed the front desk a thick envelope of cash and filled out the check-in card with a fountain pen. "Staying a month," he said. "No interruptions." His luggage was peculiar. A single gray duffel bag. Nutegis. No brand. Lynn followed protocol. She knocked each day. "Housekeeping." The same answer every time. "No service today." Same tone. Same words. No variation. On day 10, curiosity became concern. On day 20, it became fear. She noticed other oddities. The room key never left the lock. The Do Not Disturb sign was pristine. Not weathered, not creased, like it had been replaced every few days. The night clerk, a man named Emilio, told Lynn he once saw a woman enter 709. Tall, red hair, expensive coat. She walked in without knocking. Hours passed. She never came out. Lynn checked the laundry logs. No sheets from 709 had been turned in. No towels. It was as if the room didn't exist. Day 34. The front desk tried calling the room. No answer. The reservation had technically expired. Management gave the green light to enter. The manager, a jittery man named Mr. Whitmore, asked Lynn to accompany him. "Just in case he's still in there," he muttered. The hallway was silent as they approached. Lynn's hands were cold. The air near the door felt heavier. The moment the door opened, the smell hit them. It was like walking into a slaughterhouse. Sour meat, synthetic perfume, and something sharp that burned the nose. Inside, darkness. The curtains were shut tight. No signs of life, no movement. Lynn switched on a lamp. The shade glowed, revealing a perfectly tidy room. Too tidy. A book on the desk was open but blank. The minibar was locked. Then they reached the bathroom. The tub held a cardboard box. Blood had leaked out and dried along the floor tile. Something was buzzing, flies. The smell was unbearable. Lynn dropped her keys and ran out. The box contained bundles of red hair, cleanly cut, wrapped in plastic, tied with twine. Forensics confirmed the hair belonged to a missing woman, last seen in Los Angeles. A crew filming a political documentary had reported her missing weeks earlier. Her name was Elisa Warren, age 26. She had no ties to DC. Mr. M's ID was a high-quality fake. His signature on the guest card matched no records. Fingerprints were clean, no matches in any federal or state system. Security footage on the 7th floor was corrupted during the key 90-minute window when Mr. M supposedly left. Every other camera worked perfectly. The police called it an unfortunate data loss. Lynn called it something else, unnatural. Lynn didn't return to work the next day, nor the next week. When her supervisor called, she said she was hearing things. Not voices. A voice. The same muffled phrase. "No service today." She started locking her own bathroom door at night. Couldn't stand the smell of perfume. Mr. Whitmore ordered room 709 to be cleaned and cleared. The staff sent in wore gloves and masks. The carpet was ripped out, wallpaper replaced, and yet the smell returned days later. TripAdvisor reviews trickled in. The room felt cold, even with the heat on. Bathroom door kept opening by itself. Woke up to find my suitcase unzipped. The Langston Arms quietly changed the room number. It's now room 703. But Lynn, she moved to Richmond, works at a flower shop now, still keeps the keys from room 709 in a jar, a reminder. The police cleared out, and the penthouse remained sealed for weeks. But Lynn couldn't stop thinking about something odd. The size of the room. She'd cleaned room 709 before, and it had always felt larger. One night, curiosity pulled her back to the floor. She walked the hallway slowly, counting her steps. From room 708 to 709, something was off. There was dead space, like part of the floor plan was missing. She spoke to an older maintenance worker named Raymond, who'd been with the Langston Arms since the 70s. He looked uncomfortable when she asked, "There's an old linen closet next to 709, or there used to be. They walled it off years ago after some accident. Place was never the same since." That night, Lynn dreamed of a door with no knob, pulsing like a heartbeat. Back in the staff room, Lynn asked to be removed from 7th floor duties. But every time she passed that floor on the service elevator, the radio static would spike. One night, she heard what sounded like a woman whispering through the vent. Soft, desperate, unintelligible. She thought it was the old wiring, until she heard her name. "Lynn, help me." Security reviewed the tapes but found nothing. Maintenance checked the vents, no explanation. After that, Lynn began recording with a tape recorder she borrowed from the front desk. What she captured made her drop it the next day. A voice, broken, breathy, repeating, "He's still in the walls." While helping with renovations on the 7th floor, Lynn noticed something on the bathroom mirror of 709. At first glance, it looked like a scratch, but under closer inspection, it was a word: stay. The mirror had been replaced weeks earlier. This was a new one. No one admitted to carving it. Later that week, a new guest, a businessman in room 707, checked out early, complaining of headaches, sleep paralysis, and nightmares. He told the manager, "Someone knocked on my door 3 times at 3:13 a.m. each night. When I opened it, the hallway was always empty. But the last time, I saw a figure standing outside 709, just standing there." When asked to describe the figure, he just said, "Wrong." Raymond, the maintenance worker, came to Lynn with something odd. An old key he found while cleaning out the boiler room. "It's for room 709, but it doesn't match the current locks. This one's ancient." When Lynn held it, she felt a chill rush through her. The brass was cold despite the summer heat. Later that night, she returned to the 7th floor and held the key in her hand. A strange sensation overcame her, not fear, but urgency. She pressed it against the wallpaper next to the doorframe. There was a soft click, and part of the wall gave way. Behind it was a narrow passage, dusty, unlit, and filled with old linen carts. And a door, no number, just black wood and claw marks. The door groaned as Lynn pushed it open. The air inside was stale and heavy, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. The room was small, maybe once a storage area, but now it looked lived in. There was a mattress on the floor, burned candles, a mirror shattered into 7 pieces. On the wall, written in something that looked like dried blood, were the words, "She never left." Suddenly, Lynch Falasai Flitgo. And in the broken mirror, she saw not one reflection, but 2. Hers, and a tall, red-haired woman standing behind her. Lynn turned around. The room was empty, but the mirror now showed only the second figure smiling. Lynn, despite her fear, couldn't shake the need to understand what really happened in room 709. Weeks after quitting, she contacted a former colleague, Dana, who still worked at the Langston Arms. Dana confided that the room had since been stripped, but one drawer in the nightstand had been sealed shut, literally bolted. Hotel management claimed it was for security reasons, but rumor had it the drawer wouldn't stay shut unless it was locked tight. Lynn persuaded Dana to send her a photo of the drawer. It was covered in small carvings, not from a knife or tool, but almost like claw marks. And carved into the edge, faintly but clearly, were the words, "Help me, under the floor." Haunted by the message, Lynn returned to the Langston Arms, not as staff, but as a guest. She booked a room on the 6th floor and waited until late at night. Then, dressed in black and clutching a tool set she'd borrowed from her brother, she snuck up to the 7th floor. Room 709 was locked, but Dana had given her the old skeleton key, something management had forgotten to discard. Lynn crept inside. The room had been remodeled. New carpet, fresh paint, different furniture. But Lynn felt it immediately. It hadn't left. She pulled back the rug, peeled open a vent, and lifted a loose floorboard in the corner. Beneath it, she found a leather-bound journal and a blood-stained scarf. The journal wasn't signed, but it was filled with disturbing entries. The writer, presumably Mr. M, spoke of being watched, of someone following him from LA to DC. He mentioned the red-haired woman by name, Clara. She wasn't just a stranger. She had been his assistant. They were having an affair. She had uncovered something, evidence about his past life, before he became Mr. M. She threatened to expose him. The entries grew more paranoid and erratic. In the final pages, one line was repeated over and over. "She's still here. She won't leave." Even death didn't stop her. That night, back in her own hotel room, Lynn tried to sleep but couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the rustling sound again, just like what guests had described. She got up, walked to the bathroom, and froze. In the mirror behind her stood a woman, pale face, soaked red hair, mouth sewn shut. Lynn spun around. No one there. She packed her things and fled the hotel at 3:17 a.m. Determined to find answers, Lynn went to the DC Public Archives. With help from a sympathetic librarian, she uncovered something chilling. Room 709 had been the site of 3 other mysterious disappearances in the last 50 years, all involving guests who never checked out. Each case involved a red-haired woman. Each time, the room was renovated, renamed, but the pattern returned. Lynn stared at the old clippings in horror. The last recorded incident before Mr. M happened in 1966, and the photo of that red-haired woman? It was Clara. The same face, the same eyes. She hadn't aged a day. A week after leaving the Langston Arms for what she swore would be the last time, Lynn's phone rang at 2:09 a.m. An unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. All she heard was static and then the faintest whisper, "No service today." She dropped the phone. When she picked it back up, the call log was blank. No incoming number, no record of the call. But her phone's background had changed to a photo she'd never taken. A grainy shot of the 7th floor hallway, empty, except for a woman with red hair standing at the end. Obsessed, Lynn convinced a former bellhop to show her archived guest logs. She scanned through room 709's records and began compiling a list of people who had stayed there long-term. Many had never booked another hotel again. Some were later reported missing. A handful had committed suicide within a year of their stay. One name stood out, a woman who checked in under the name Iris Fontaine in 2003. Lynn found an old obituary. Iris had drowned in her bathtub. The article said she had become paranoid after a trip to DC, claimed she was being followed by a woman who wouldn't speak, just stare. She'd even written a note before her death. "She watches through the mirrors. She never leaves the room. And now, neither can I." Lynn returned one final time, needing closure. As she sat in the lobby, a man in a gray suit entered. Early 50s, sunglasses, clean-shaven. Her heart stopped. It was him, Mr. M, or someone who looked exactly like him 27 years later. He approached the front desk and asked for room 709. The clerk told him the room didn't exist anymore. The man smiled politely and said, "Oh, I'm sure it does. It just doesn't want to be found." Then he turned to Lynn and said, without blinking, You left something under the floorboards. Lynn's final lead took her to a forgotten graveyard in rural Virginia. According to city records, Clara Whitmore, a red-haired stage actress, died in 1923 after a hotel fire killed 3 guests at a place once called the Langston House. Among the victims, her lover, a political aide named Marcus Morrow, burned beyond recognition. Some believed Clara set the fire herself after he tried to leave her for another woman. But Clara's grave was empty, a headstone but no remains, and the photo from 1923, taken the night before the fire, showed her in a black dress, standing next to Marcus, who bore an uncanny resemblance to Mr. M. Lynn tried to leave DC for good, but no matter where she went, hotels in Richmond, Philadelphia, even Boston, she found herself booked into rooms on the 7th floor. The numbers changed, 703, 715, 722. But they always felt like 709. Always the same musty scent. Always the rustling sound behind the curtain. Always the same dreams. Clara, staring silently, mouthing something she couldn't understand. One night, Lynn finally shouted in her dream, "What do you want?" Clara didn't answer. She simply pointed to the mirror. Lynn became obsessed with mirrors. She started covering them in her apartment, taping thick black garbage bags over each one. But the reflections didn't stop. Even with no mirrors, she'd glimpse room 709 in puddles, in windows, even in the glint of cutlery. Always the same view. The clawfoot tub, the torn curtain, and Clara, standing inside the mirror watching. A paranormal expert she contacted gave her one piece of advice. If a spirit uses a mirror to reach you, it means it's already inside. Lynn decided to return one last time to the Langston Arms. She booked a nearby room, not room 709, it no longer existed after all. But when the clock struck 2:09 a.m., everything changed. Her room grew quiet. The hum of the AC stopped. The digital clock on the nightstand flickered, then reset to midnight. And outside her door, the hallway looked different, older. The wallpaper faded, the sconces flickering with gaslight instead of electricity. And at the end of the hall, room 709. Its brass number plate gleamed in candlelight. Compelled, Lynn walked down the hallway toward room 709. The closer she got, the more distorted time felt. Sounds were muted, her own footsteps delayed by half a second, like echoes arriving before their cause. When she touched the doorknob, she felt heat, not warmth, but fire underneath. She pushed the door open. The room looked exactly as it had decades ago, ornate, pristine, as if frozen in time. Clara was waiting, seated by the window. Not a ghost, flesh and bone, breathing. "Welcome back," Clara said. "You left your reflection here." Lynn couldn't move, couldn't speak. Clara walked toward her with a book, old leather, soaked in something dark. She opened it. Inside were names, dozens of them, guests of room 709, all marked with the same ending, paid in full. Then Clara turned to the back page. Lynn's name had already been written, in red ink. "You've seen too much," Clara said. "The room doesn't forget." Lynn screamed and ran, but when she opened the door to leave, she was back in the lobby, alone, sweating, shaking. The front desk clerk didn't even look up. After that night, Lynn couldn't escape room 709. She moved to another state, new apartment, new job. She even changed her name. But the nightmares persisted, always 2:09 a.m., always the same door, always Clara waiting. One night, she stayed at a roadside motel during a business trip. The clerk handed her the key without looking. "Room 709, he mumbled. She froze. "But this place only has one floor." The clerk looked confused. "Miss, you've already checked in." She opened the door to find a familiar clawfoot tub, a dark stain on the floor, and her reflection, already inside the mirror, waiting. Lynn hired a local historian, an old professor who specialized in architectural anomalies. She asked him to dig into the Langston Arms and room 709 specifically. After 2 weeks, he called her in a panic. "There is no 7th floor. Not originally. The blueprints stop at 6. That room shouldn't exist. It was never built. When she showed him a picture she'd secretly taken of room 709's hallway, the old man went pale. That's not Langston Arms. That's the Arcanum, a spiritualist hotel that burned down in 1894. The room you saw hasn't existed in over a century. That night, Lynn set an alarm to avoid falling asleep, terrified that dreams might return her to room 709. But she must have dozed off because she awoke at exactly 2:09 a.m. Again, only this time the room around her shifted. The curtains twisted. The bed morphed into the clawfoot tub. A shadow moved beneath the rug like something alive underneath it. And her watch, it now read, May 1997. She looked up into the mirror and saw herself, in a housekeeper's uniform, walking toward the bathroom with a towel. Somehow, she was back in her own past. Lynn found herself inside the memories of the room itself, a living history. In one flash, Clara appeared in her 1920s form, soaked in blood, sobbing beside a mutilated man in a bathtub. Another flash, Clara, chanting with other women in a seance, hands clasped, trying to bind the guest forever. Another, Clara screaming as she was dragged into the mirror by something faceless and enormous, made of shadow and glass. Clara hadn't haunted the room. She was its first victim. The room fed on pain, and Clara had been its offering, its bride. Back in her own time, Lynn realized the room wasn't just trapping victims. It was rewriting them. She looked at old Langston Arms staff photos. She wasn't in any of them. Not in the year she worked there. Not in the employee logbook. Not even on her own tax documents. It was like she'd never existed. The room had erased her identity bit by bit. Every time she dreamed of it, every time she saw the red-haired woman, another piece of her reality shifted. Soon, she feared, she would just become another entry in the book Clara showed her. Another ghost with no story. Lynn made her choice. She returned to the Langston Arms during a thunderstorm, snuck into the utility stairwell, and climbed until she found a door that shouldn't be there. Room 709. She entered not to escape but to make a deal. Inside, she whispered, "You can't keep taking the forgotten. I remember all of them." The mirror rippled. Clara appeared, but behind Clara the shadows moved. The room responded. It offered Lynn a choice. Become the keeper. Take Clara's place, or be forgotten forever. Lynn walked forward and vanished. The Langston Arms quietly reopened that fall after brief renovations. Room 709 was officially removed. The elevator now skipped from floor 6 to 8, but internally, among veteran staff, they all knew the room was still there. Occasionally, someone new would press both buttons in the elevator, 6 and 8, and sometimes it stopped at an unmarked floor. One night, a junior bellhop took a dare and found the hallway. He saw Lynn, not quite alive, not quite dead, standing perfectly still inside the room, beside the mirror, dressed in all black with white gloves, like a funeral concierge. She spoke only once. "Do not knock. Do not enter. Not unless you're ready to remember who you really are." He ran and never returned. A few months later, a guest checked in under the name Mr. M again. Same cash payment, same gray suit, same sunglasses. Room 709 didn't exist anymore, yet the system inexplicably assigned him to it. The front desk tried to correct the mistake, but he insisted, "That's the room I reserved." Security footage showed him walking down a hall that shouldn't have led anywhere. And yet, he never came back. Room 709 had summoned its favorite guest and completed the loop. Staff began noticing an annual pattern. Each May, during the week Mr. M had originally checked in, strange things would happen. Doors opening and closing on their own. Smells of roses mixed with formaldehyde. Room 709 reappearing on the staff dashboard for 90 minutes at exactly 2:09 a.m. Guests on the 6th or 8th floors complained of muffled voices above or below them, always saying the same thing: "No service today." Those who stayed too long near the room would forget where they were. Some would forget who they were, and some never checked out. In 2009, a true crime podcaster came to investigate the legends surrounding the Langston Arms. She stayed in room 705, hoping to get close enough without crossing over. She never released her final episode. Her recorder was found in the hallway. The audio was chilling, mostly static, but one line came through clearly. She said I could leave if I brought someone back. The implication was horrifying. The room didn't just trap people. It used them as lures, baiting future victims with false promises of freedom. Each new ghost became part of the machine. One final entry in the Langston Arms guest book appeared in 2022. It was signed by Lynn. I've made my peace. The room doesn't own me anymore. That night, room 709 burned from the inside out. No fire alarms, no structural damage, but the room was gone, erased like it had never been there. All staff who remembered the room forgot. The hallway sealed itself. Only one person, the historian Lynn had spoken to, remembered anything. He received a small package with no return address. Inside, a broken mirror shard, and a note that read, I remembered, that's how I escaped. The Langston Arms still operates today. Room 709 no longer appears in the system. But if you ask the right person, maybe a retired maid or an old concierge, they'll tell you, the room never left, it just moved. They'll whisper about dreams of clawfoot tubs, the scent of chemical perfume, and the feeling of being watched through mirrors. And some say, if you stand alone in front of a mirror at 2:09 a.m. and whisper, no service today 3 times, you might find yourself waking up in a room with gold-trimmed chandeliers, marble floors, and a red-haired woman offering you a towel.